Java project known as K4. So now today we will see that how you can identify web-based components with the help of Selenium. Okay, so hold on, I'll include the Selenium jar files in the project first. So web-based components means how you can identify, suppose there's a link on the page and if you want to click on the link, or there's a text field on the page and you want to say type into that text field, right? So basically we will see how Selenium works. Okay, how Selenium works. Look, as I told you yesterday, Selenium works on the page source. Okay, for example, if you go to any website, I'll open up a browser and say this is msn.com website, right? If you go right click on this page and if you look at the page source, then Selenium works on this page source. Alright, so this page source is made in HTML language, so it's very necessary to understand HTML language. Right, for example, this website n.redu.com. So Selenium will work on this page source. Now in HTML, you have got certain tag names and certain attributes associated with the tag. For example, div is a tag name over here, and ID and class are attributes associated with the tag name div. Fine. Okay. So just a minute, guys. Right. So this is the div tag, and these are the attributes associated with the tag. So in HTML language, it is the same story on the complete page. Right. There will be a tag name, and there will be some attributes associated with the tag. The tag represents a certain web component on the page. For example, a link or a text field or something. For example, all the tags will start from the anchor tag A. A is known as the anchor tag. Most of you might be knowing. It represents a link. Right. Div tag represents a certain section on the page. Okay. Right. So this is how HTML is made. I'll just tell you elaborately to understand the page source in a better way. Right. To understand the page source in a better way, it is always a good practice to install a tool known as Firebug in your Firefox. Firebug in Firefox helps you to analyze the page source. Right. All you need to do is that you just need to go to Google and type over here Firebug for Firefox. So you'll get the first link over here. You can go to this link. If you are using older version of Firefox, then this button will be disabled. Otherwise, it will be enabled. You can add this as an add-on into Firefox by clicking on this button. Or if you have older version of Firefox, then say you can try Firebug 9. So if you go over here and scroll down on the next page, among the results, you will see somewhere, yeah, for example, this button is enabled, add to Firefox. So you simply add Firebug to Firefox. Right. Once you have added, Firefox will be restarted, and on the top right corner over here, you will have the icon of Firebug. Fine. When you click on this icon, a tool like this will open up. Right. On this, you will find that there is an arrow out here. Out here, there is an arrow. The arrow sign is there, right? You click on that arrow and move your mouse on any element. For example, I move my mouse over this link. In the page source, I'll have the HTML code corresponding to the link highlighted. Or suppose I move my mouse over this search box, then I'll have the HTML code corresponding to the search box highlighted. So I hope you got my point, right? Okay, fine. Now this is for Firefox. What about Chrome? How do you inspect elements on Chrome? If I open up Chrome, hold on, just 2 minutes. Right. If I open up Chrome and if I go to any website, for example, if I go to this website, in Chrome there is something known as Chrome Inspector, which is already there built in inside Chrome. Okay, so you right click, for example, I have to investigate this particular link. Okay, then I can right click on that and select investigate inspect element. So automatically in Chrome a window will come up, right, which will look like this, right, and the code for Chrome will be the code for the link will be pasted here. You know what, generally the page source remains the same across the browser because the look and feel of the complete website is same across different browsers, right? If you talk in if you talk in Chrome, if you talk in Mozilla, then the page source will also be the same. It is a very rare case that the page source is different in different browsers, but it is same in all the browsers. Page source is same in all the browsers, and Selenium works on page source. Okay, right? So how does it work? I'll also talk about I first. In I there is something known as I developer tool. You hit F12 of your keyboard, the I developer tool will open up and you can investigate the page source over there, right? But generally if you investigate the page source in Mozilla, right, if you investigate the page source in Mozilla, then the same page source will be there in Chrome and IE as well. Alright, I hope you are able to understand me. Okay, now how does Selenium identifies the element? As I told you, every element has a particular tag name. This is the tag name and particular set of attributes. So these are the attributes over here. Fine. Now hold on. I'll make a new Excel file. Right. So out here, fine, in this Excel file, just one, right. So over here, right, I told you that in Chrome you have got Chrome Inspector, in I you have got I Developer Tool, and in Firefox you have got Firebug. Okay, now I'll make a sheet over here component, just be with me, tag name, mandatory attribute, and optional attribute. Right. Now there are various web components available. Okay. For example, there is a text field on a page. Right. Then there are buttons on the page. Then there are radio buttons on the page. Then checkboxes are also there. Right. The links are also there. Normal drop list is there. It's in a multi-select drop list in which you can select things. Right. And then you have got a text field. Okay, in this, sorry, normal text, not a text field, normal text on the page. Right. Then you can also have images on a web page. Right. So majority, like these are the major things which are there on any web page. Majorly, right, which are visible to the human eye. Fine. Now, how can Selenium identify these objects? We see menu is a drop list. Okay. So how can Selenium identify these objects? Look, the thing is, every object will have a particular tag name and particular set of mandatory and optional attributes. With that, we can identify the elements. Right. For example, a text field. If you look at the text field on this page in the page source, then the tag name for text field is input. Okay. Tag name is input for a text field. Fine. And if you look at it, there are various attributes. ID is an attribute, class, type. Always you will find that every text field may have an ID or may not have an ID. ID is something like a unique attribute which identifies the element, right? But it is not mandatory. Some elements can have, sometimes the text field can have an ID, sometimes it can't have an ID. Guys, I request you to keep yourself on mute, right? Because it creates a lot of noise otherwise, right? So as I was telling you, sometimes an element can have an ID or cannot have an ID. So out of all these attributes which are present over here, type equals to text attribute will always be present in case of a text field. A text field will always have the attribute type equals to text. So over here, mandatory attribute type equals to text will always be there. For a text field, the tag name is input and mandatory attribute is type equals to text. Okay. For a button on the page as well, the type is always input. Sorry, the tag name is always input. All the buttons on a page which are HTML buttons will always have the attribute input as the tag name. Somebody speaking? Hello? Please, I request you, please keep your microphone on mute. Right? Please, I request you. Rajat, please keep your microphone on mute. I have kept you on mute, Rajat, right now. Alright. So over here, right, as I was telling you, for a button as well, okay, the tag name would always be input. Rather, for a radio button and checkbox also, the tag name is always input for these four web components. If you go to any web page, if they are present, then the tag name would always be input tag. Right. But the mandatory attribute will differ. For a button, if I make type, the type would be equal to submit. For a radio button, the type is always equals to radio. And for a checkbox, the type attribute is always equals to checkbox. Right. For example, you go to the same website, timesofindia.com. It's a news channel website in India. If you if you scroll down, right, and suppose if you look at this radio button over here, okay, then this radio button has the tag name input, right, and the type is radio. Okay, so for these components, the tag name would always be input, but the mandatory attributes will differ. For a link, the tag name is A and mandatory attribute is href. Any link on any web page, if you look at any link on any web page, for example, this link over here, this link will have an anchor tag A, an href attribute, which actually will point towards the URL which is going to open once you click on the link. Okay, once you click on the link. So if you take it into consideration, then for a link the tag name is A and mandatory attribute is href. In case of a list, a drop list, for example, this is a drop list, right? If you look at the list, then list has got a very special structure. The tag name for the list is select tag. Okay, always you will have the tag name of select list is select tag. If you expand this, under the list you will see various option tags. Each option tag represents what is there inside the list. Okay, and then in the end the select tag it closes. Right. So the select tag represents a list basically. So the drop list always have the tag name known as select. There is no mandatory attribute for it. Right. Now what about text? Visible text which is there on the page. Well, for visible text there is no particular guideline. Okay, sometimes it can be inside the tag known as div, sometimes span, right. Sometimes a tag like para tag p. So there is no defined tag. Text can be present inside any tag. Okay, there is no mandatory or optional attribute for it. Fine. An image on a web page. Now this is good. An image on a web page. For example, the image out here on the top. Hold on. Just 1 minute. Just 1 minute. If you go to google.com, just a minute. They are actually bringing the image from the division, something which is just having the image. Um, just 1 minute. Yeah. For example, this is an image. Okay, or this is an image. In the page source, you will find the attribute img, which denotes an image. Okay, right. So out here for image, the tag name is img, and there is a mandatory attribute known as src source attribute which denotes the URL from which the image is loaded. For example, out here the source attribute is here, src. Okay, or out here this is the src attribute. Right. So src means the source attribute, right, and it is having the URL from which the image loads, right. So these are the various components, and these are the various tag names associated with the components and mandatory attributes. Now there are some optional attributes which may or may not be present with every element, right. An optional attribute, they are genuinely their ID, their name, and sometimes class attribute. Okay, so these are the three attributes. They can be or cannot be present with all of these components. If they are present, then that is good. If a component is having an ID, like ID is a unique thing which can represent or which can denote a component uniquely on a web page, then it becomes very easy to identify the object. Or even name is also unique, right. Class is not unique, class can repeat itself, but generally if the component has got an ID or a name, it becomes very easy to identify the component on the web page by writing Selenium code, right. So this is how the components are divided on a web page. These are the components, these are the tag names, mandatory attribute and optional attribute. Okay, now how do I go forward and identify the component? What kind of code will I have to write and how will I use these attributes? Right. Now the thing is, the easiest way to identify the object is using its ID or the name. We'll talk about that first. Fine. Let me make a new class and uh, I will call this class as identification. Okay. Or yeah, just let it remain like this, and inside it I will simply write a WebDriver code, say WebDriver driver equals to new Firefox driver. Okay, so this will launch Firefox. Okay, after launching Firefox, I say I'm going to the website. Just 1 minute. Hold on. Say I go to the page salesforce.com. I try to log in into it and I try to enter the username password or something. So I basically go to this login page of Salesforce, fine, and after that I have to enter the username and password. Okay, now if you look at this text field over here in Firebug, you will find that this is an input tag. Obviously, text field will always have an input tag, and it will always have the text type attribute text, and the ID of this input box is username. Since it's got an ID, it is very easy to identify it because No, ideally no two elements on the page should have the same ID. Fine. Now ID equals to username. How do I tell Selenium that go forward and pick up this element on the basis of its ID? Fine. Now to do that in Selenium, hold on, I'll go to seleniumhq.org. In Selenium documentation, you will see that there is a class. If you go to Java doc, right, and if you go to the WebDriver interface, everything starts from the WebDriver interface. Okay, this is the root. In this you have got functions which are present in all the elements. The most important function is this one, find element. What it does, it finds an element on the page. What do you mean by an element? Technically in Selenium everything is known as an element, like a text box is an element, a link is an element, a button is an element. All these components which I just explained you over here, these are technically known as elements. If you know QTP, then please don't confuse yourself with the web element in QTP. That is completely different. Don't take that into consideration right now. Okay, so find element is a function which can find a particular element on a web page, right? So if you write over here, driver dot, you will get that function find element. That means you are instructing the driver to go to the page and find some element on it. Now how do I find the element? Okay, how do I find the element? That criteria is given over here. Inside the find element function, you have to pass over the reference of the by class. By is a class in Selenium which is basically having various locator mechanisms. This class is having mechanisms used to locate elements within the document. Document means the HTML page. Okay, for example, you can identify using class name, CSS selector, right? Then ID, link text, name. I am talking about ID right now. This is the most simplest one, right? So you go to your code and you write over here driver.find element. In the arguments, you have to give by dot what? By the class name, by the ID, by the link text, by the name. How do you want to identify the element? I'll say that I want to identify the element on the page by the ID of the element. Okay, and I'll put the ID. The ID we saw that was username. Okay, right? So this will go and find the username on the web page. Okay, if you run this much and if no error comes up, that means it's been able to find the username field on the page. Just hold on, let it open up the browser. Right, and see, it's opening successfully. The WebDriver over here, it's turned black in color from red. That means the code has stopped executing. Okay, initially when you execute it, it will be red. I'll again show you. When you run this, if the WebDriver control is running behind the scenes, right, you will always find that WebDriver will be red in color. Okay, if it stops, after that it's gone. Fine. Now lastly, I will come over to your question. Just hold on. I'll come over to your question. Just be with me. Right. It will take around 2 to 3 days for me to clear this complete identification thing. Right. So now when I write driver.find element, no error came up, nothing came up. That means it is able to successfully find the element. But how will I work with that element? I need to write something inside the user field, or from the text field I want to read what is written inside the text field, or if I want to clear the value of the text field. So how do I perform the operations on this username field? The answer again lies in Java doc. Okay, answer again lies in Javadoc. Over here, you see that uh, out here, yes, out here, the find element function which was there in the WebDriver interface, it returns back the reference of an interface known as web element. Web element denotes any element on a page, whether it is a button, text field, radio button, everything I told you, right? It falls under web element, right? And this web element interface has got functions like clear, click, right? Or get size, get the location of the element, get the text of the element, is the element displayed, is it enabled, right? Send key means type into it. So what happens is that when you write driver.find element, in return this returns you the reference of web element. I can write web element username equals to this. This function find element will return you the web element after finding it. Now what do you have to do with username? You can write username dot. You will get lot of functions. All these functions are from the web element interface. Okay, right. Now one more thing, guys. Here I am always going inside the documentation of Selenium. Right. I can also import the documentation of Selenium into Eclipse. Okay. You don't need to go to seleniumhq.org every time. You can simply directly get the documentation into Eclipse. This is Javadoc link, right? You can right click on the link and select copy link location option over here. Okay. Copy the location of this link, fine, and go to the project properties. Fine, what I am doing is I am importing Javadocs into Eclipse, the documentation into Eclipse. I'll go to the project properties and under Java build path, here are all the Java jar files for Selenium which you had included in the project. Right. Out of these jar files, look at the major one which is Selenium Java 2.x.jar. This one. Right. And expand it. You will see the option Javadoc location over here. You edit it and paste the URL which you had just copied the link location and omit index.html from the end. Don't give index.html in the end. Right. Click on OK and again click on OK. Now Javadocs are imported inside Eclipse. Suppose if I move my mouse over WebDriver, I will see the documentation of WebDriver right away. WebDriver is the interface. These all classes are implementing the interface. Okay. If I move my mouse over Firefox driver, I'll get the complete information about Firefox driver. Right. There's a question being asked: is this text field, but the type property is email and not text? Yes, it can, at times it can also be email, Rishi. At times it can also be email, but most of the time it is text. Okay. So now driver.find element. If you look at find element function, it returns you the reference of web element interface. It is looking at the link over here, web element. If I click on it, the Javadoc itself for web element will open up inside Eclipse. So you really don't have to go to seleniumhq.org. Okay, so out here I am writing driver.find element by the ID username, and this is the username you get. Right. Now for this username I can do anything. I can write username dot send keys. I can put some username over here. Similarly, I can extract the password text field. I can write web element password equals to driver dot find element by the ID. I know that the ID is also there in the password field over here. So if you look at the password field, the ID is password. This is the most easiest way to identify the element, right? And then password dot send keys P1. So when you run this, it will type in U1 and P1 in username and password. Send keys function is used to type something inside a web element. Okay, if you move a mouse over send keys, it will give you the description since the Java docs have been added. Use this method to simulate typing into an element which may set its value. Right. So when I run this, you see that, right? So it started interacting with the web component. Okay, so it starts interacting with the web component this way. Okay, now one thing for dealing with one element, I am writing two lines. I can also write this in one line in one go. I can write driver dot find element this dot send keys v1 and driver dot find element by the ID password send keys v1. Okay, right. So you have got the option like this. The execution starts from the left side. First the element is found and then the send keys is fired. The execution starts from left to right. So this is more easy when this is how people write rather than writing this. So first this highlighted part web element would be extracted and inside it u1 would be written. Okay, right. Lastly, I just told you how you can extract in Chrome and IE. In Opera and Safari, I'll have to check it out. Opera is not officially supported as of now, and Safari is still unstable. Okay, generally with WebDriver we do on three browsers: IE, Mozilla, and Chrome. Right. Gopinath is asking a question. Then we are not using. We are using web element interface, Gopinath. This thing will evaluate at runtime behind the scenes. This thing will evaluate to web element interface, and on that, send keys will be fired. Okay, right? This will evaluate to the web element interface first. Right. Now, there was a question you asked that what if two elements on the page have the same ID? Somebody was asking this question. Look, if two elements on the page, for example, there are two text fields on the page which have the same ID username, this is happening. Firstly, this is wrong then. You should go and ask your developer that why he has done like this. Because ID on a page is supposed to be unique. Okay, it's like the identification mark. It's like the unique thing about an object. If two objects have the same ID, then that means something is wrong and you should talk to the developer. Still, if they are having same ID, how will you uh, identify, and how will Selenium identify that? What will Selenium do if there are two username fields on the page? Look, Selenium scans the page like this. Selenium scans the page from the top left to the top right like this, and it moves down like this. It scans the page like this. So it moves from the top left corner of the screen and goes to the bottom right corner of the screen. Now if there are two components on the page, say one is out here and one is out here, which have the same ID, okay, Then if you write driver.find element function, it will go and find the first one. The second one will not be found. Right. What if I want to find the second one and I don't want to find the first one? I will talk about that later on. But driver.find element function, this one, finds the first element on the page. Even if you look at the description, if you move a mouse over find element, it's clearly written finds the first web element using the given method. It finds the first one. Okay, right? No, error will not be generated. Error will not be generated. It will go and find the first one. What if you want to find the second one or the third one? You want to interact with that. I will talk about that later on. That's how you do that. Fine. Gopinath is asking the question. Find element is from driver. Yeah, find element is actually in the WebDriver. That's why you are able to write driver.find element. And this returns you a web element like this. And on that web element, you can fire functions. So at runtime, this will evaluate to web element. Okay, right. So, right now, the thing is, this was using ID. Now, sometimes names are also there. Name is also unique property. Fine. For example, in this name is also present. Name is also unique property. So if an object has got an ID or a name, it is the best way to identify the object. But if it is not having ID or name, what you can do? In that case, we use XPaths or CSS selectors. Not all, I'm sorry, not all the components on the page will have an ID. For example, the text over here, remember username. Okay, this will not have an ID. This is not having an ID. Right. Venkat is saying this is tedious one, right? Instead of record and execute are better one. Look, Venkat, record and execute is obviously very easy. It looks very easy. You can execute, record, and run. Fine. But you cannot execute it on a larger scale. This thing looks tedious to you, right? I can also record and run the same thing, yes. But what if you have got 500 scenarios? What will you do? You record 500 scenarios, and if something changes on the page, then everything will go for a toss. For example, you go to the website bbc.com, record a particular scenario on bbc.com, run it after 2 days, it will never run because the complete website changes. Right, so you need the WebDriver over here with which you can write some dynamic code. Secondly, record and run will not generate HTML reports. You will not have reports generated. With WebDriver, you can have very good HTML reports and all. We will see. You have got XSLT reports. XSLT reports like these. Hold on, let me show you. XSLT reports look like these. You will be generating these kind of reports. With ID, you cannot do that. Thirdly, what if you want to run one test case with multiple sets of data? I have executed this test case with just single set of data. But what if I have to execute the single test with multiple sets of data? I can do that with WebDriver code. But with IDE, again, it is a tedious thing to do. Record and run is there. If you have a project in which you have just 5 to 6 test cases, it's of a very lower scale, it's not a very complicated one, then I also agree that go for WebDriver and automate it. Sorry, go for IDE and automate it. But if we have a project on a larger scale, which generally the projects are these days, right? You cannot even think of using IDE over there. You'll end up wasting more time, basically. Okay, right. Now, as I was saying that if you cannot identify the object using ID or you cannot identify the object using uh, name, you have to use XPath or CSS selectors. I will talk about those in the next class. That will be after